Good afternoon. This is Ada Bar Torah on Parashat Haazinu. This Parsha takes place on the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was dying. In the last Parsha, he promised to put the share to the entire Jewish people, and this week's Parsha, which is short but contains an incredible amount of things in it. Is in a song. Most of it is dealing with, first part of it is telling Israel what's going to happen if they keep the laws of Hashem, and what's going to happen if they don't. And it then goes on to, and how they'll suffer will be the hands of the nations. The last part of it goes on to describe of the song, and tells what will happen in the ultimate days, the redemption. And if that Hashem tells Moshe on that same day that he's going to descend to the mountain, see the Eretz Canaan, but he won't enter it, even though it was his fondest dream. And that's how the Parsha ends. And the last Parsha, which for this year will, as normal, we read on Simchas Torah, which happens comes out on Shabbat. Moshe gives his blessings, and it describes Moshe's passing and description of his greatness. I would like to focus now on a few verses. The wording of the first pasuk of this parsha is rather interesting. Haazinu, Hashemayim, and V'deber, and Tisharet Amrapi. Give, O heavens, give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and may the earth hear the words of my mouth. Now, why is Moshe speaking to the heavens and earth? On a basic level, is because the only ones who will be around, nobody hearing the song, then nobody will be in a position to, in future generations, remember the song, these being hidden or heard. So one simple explanation, basic level, is that it will read that only the heavens and earth will be around long enough to testify. And that's on one level. I'd like to give some other explanations. These are based on Likutei Torah, and this is actually the Torah of Rav Chaim Vital, one of the primary students of the Arizal, and also the famous commentator, the Or Chaim. Now, one explanation that is given here is that what we are talking about, what does it say? Incline, listen to Shemayim, incline your ear, and Bevishal and Rokochim, and Zainu call Dibor, and Shmiya Aretz. So that's one way of understanding it. Another way of understanding it is beyond that, that when we're talking about the Shemayim and the Aretz, we're not talking about little Shemayim and Aretz. We're talking about when it says Asher, when it says Shemayim, it's talking about the Hashem, heavens. Because really he's addressing Hashem. And The Shemayim is also telling us that the Shemayim, Hashem has a hand on a man and what he does and how he gets started and how he creates, this gets created and how he, it's also an implication here of pregnancy and birth. And on another level, it's talking about the purity of heaven, purity of spiritual things, and then purity of earth, because what happens here is that Shemayim represents the higher spiritual world, Adam, and that should have also applied to the earth, except Adam Arishon and Chava ate from the Eitz Hadas and Tov and Ra, and that created problems immediately. So he's addressing the earth, he's addressing man. And why is the earth impure? Because of eating of the fruit, listening to the snake, the poison of the snake, the Yetzer Hara went into everybody. And it was only with death and burial is the poison for each individual to get out of the snake, because ultimately when people will be resurrected, they will be resurrected without this impurity, because the Yetzer Hara will be gone at that point, at least under control. That's one explanation. The second, that's one explanation. And we say another explanation is what says when you put your ear, that can mean two things. It means one has to cup one's ear because they hear something different, distant, but it has a second, another meaning is that you speaking right into the ear, and Moshe speaking right into the ear, the heaven to Hashem, because spiritually he's closer to that, and earth he's further from. That's why it tells him to listen, to be careful. That's another understanding. Now, another explanation on a different level is that it's actually Hashem, that we're looking at the physical aspect. From the physical aspect, Moshe then tells the heavens to incline to earth because he's physically closer to earth, and therefore they can just hear because he can speak directly into the air of the earth, so to speak, of man. And what does that also mean? It also means that, as I explained, that the Shemaya means the heavens, the God, but the earth means man. That's why he's speaking directly to man. And he's trying to speak to our Yetzer Tov, a good inclination, but also an evil inclination. And continuing in this vein, a further explanation it would hear the enunciation letters by his mouth. In other words, there has to be no magnification. And proof, by the way, that Moshe, we're talking about Moshe being closer to heaven than earth, because it says in Ishiel 1:2, the opposite, hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth. Why does it say that? The hearing for the earth, even though it was distance from him, from ear for the earth, even though it was close to him. because there he was communicating messages of Hashem. In our case, it's the opposite. It's Moshe's song that Hashem had inspired him to give. And it's also addressing the Jewish people themselves, because it explains if Jewish people will give ear to the Torah, which means the heavens, if you give ear to it, you listen to it at Shemayim, it's as if you are Shemayim. In a sense, we're angelic. We were supposed to be at that level. We were at Adam Rishon was before the Cape. Jewish people were at Har Sinai when they got the Torah, and if they hadn't committed the sin of the golden calf, would have stayed at that level. And therefore referred to as heavens. However, when it says I will speak, giving forceful or harsh speech, this is when the Jewish people are not following the Torah, and that part of the Torah is listening to reproof, something we should keep in mind at this time of Yom Kippur, as we're approaching Yom Kippur, the culmination of the days of judgment, that we need to hear the rebuke, we need to hear the warnings of the psalm. This portion quite often comes up between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for that reason. And we do see another theme that it's brought down in the Zohar, indicating that even though we're going through admonition and we're going through had a history of suffering, that we will hear the voice of Hashem, and there will be a voice that will lead to the Kiyas Mesim, the resurrection of the dead at the time of the coming of Mashiach. So in a very real sense, and that will lead us to more heavenly things. So in this parsha, starting with this first verse and going on, as I'm going to explain in a minute, this whole concept of is embedded of both reproof, promises for the future, potential will be heavenly even when we're on earth, the angels when we follow Hashem's Torah and His mitzvahs. And unfortunately, when people do the opposite, it leads to the ground, it leads to many problems. Now, this is explained very well. Now, the Cade of Adam Rishon led to a whole changing of the earth. If that hadn't happened, if the Adam had meaning fruit, the final redemption would have come on the spot. But it didn't. And it then says, it's talking about he will surely die. Now, as we see, Adam lived to quite a ripe old age of 930. So, what are we talking about here? Because he did, in fact, die, not that day, but he died early because, as explained in Midrash and other sources, Hashem showed Adam Rishon future souls, and he said this one soul is supposed to play a very major part in the world. However, he only has a few minutes of life, at which point Adam Rishon gave that time, and to David Melech, who's lived 70 years, also provided the ultimate source of Mashiach, and that was in partial compensation for the fact that he brought that to the world by eating of these fruits. So what was the tikkun for his sins? Because he couldn't fix the world himself. The tikkun was the improvement. The thing that had the fixing was that David was allowed to come into existence, lead a meaningful life, and will make that will lead to the making of Mashiach, the ultimate redemption. One opinion said it's the descendant of of David. Let's say will be David himself, and at that time there'll be Tekiyas and Macing. Now we see that in the name Adam himself. There's a hint to that, because each one of the letter Adam is spelled man, is spelled Aleph, Dalet, Mem, Sofit in Hebrew, and the Aleph stands for Adam, the Dalet stands for David, and the Mem Sofit stands for Mashiach. So that we are going to have that, we're going to have that fulfillment. We are in that stage now. Now in the Parsha later, it's also alluded to, and I'd like to turn to Pasuk 35, and it says, Li nakam yishalem la'ed tamut ragla ki karov hayom edam chosh the toda lamo. Was what's going to happen. Mine is vengeance and retribution. At the time, their feet will falter, for the day of the catastrophe is near, and future events are rushing them. Now, it has, like many things in the Chumash, it has more than one meaning. One meaning is that when it says, when your feet falter, that's talking about the Jewish people. In other words, what's protecting them from the long exile we had, that's lasted almost 2,000 years, was the merit of the fathers Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. However, as soon as that wears out, there will be a faltering, and there will be an end, and then the exile and all those things we've suffered throughout history will come into play. A stage we're now nearing the end of, Bezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help. And the Parsha then goes on to say a few verses later, Roy ata ki anihu, ein Elokim iamdi, ani amit, achayeh, machatzi ani lefra, al midi matzil. And it says, see now that I am he, and no God is with me. I will put to death and I will bring life. I will strike down and I will heal. And there is no rescuer from my hand. Now, that is also talking, those two Pesukim, as explained by Rav Shimshon Mashans, that what is explaining here, that this wording, as also explained in the book of Daniel, it's a remez, is a hint to Ku'ula, because what's going to happen, there'll be Moed Moedim, there will be holidays, and there will be crushing. What will be crushed will be the nations. They'll finally be punished for what they've done to our people. And it says Mashmal Remes Lakula. In other words, and they'll be paying a price for that. And the other pasuk was Susriyati Kini Ani Vahu. What is he saying? What that is talking about, who's the who? It's talking about Hashem as the king. It's Mr. the Keter Elyon to Hashem in that capacity, and that he'll give Shefa to us, and he can't be seen, but he will give that. And Lamal and Mater, he'll bring Shefa to our people, reward, plentiful, to the point where we will ultimately, the memories of all the suffering will fade. And that's why Moshe at this point is talking in the future tense. And who will be bringing that deliverance? What aspect of Shem we bring it? And Rav Shem Shon from Mishans explains that what we're talking about is that it's going to be Hashem in person, because he said, when it says the letters of the name and Nephi on the name of the name, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, it's an abbreviation for the 4 Anis, the Dalet being not letter, Hebrew letter for the number 4, and Ani, and Ni, and that's a remez to this him intervening directly, and it then goes on to explain what in the 4, he goes on to explain the 4 capacities, and he says that this is Hashem's active intervention. Where does he get that? He gets that from Parshas Sefer Shmos, Yud Beis, where they're talking about the liberation of Egypt, and it says, Avadati, to Hashem saying, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, Ani, and Lo Malach Bahu, Darish Kamki, Avadati Ani. In other words, Hashem will be coming directly, will directly intervene in history. The nations of the world will recognize his role, as we said in the Davana and praying in Tefillah and Rosh Hashanah. So we may at this time, may we all do a complete tshuva in these last remaining days of Aseres and May tshuva, and then Yom Kippur, we should truly do tshuva, and may we individually and as a people merit redemption. And I'd like to wish everybody Gamasim and Tova, may we all be inscribed in the good book, the book of all kinds of benefits and all kinds of redemption. We should be forgiven and lead it fresh and start fresh. And this year, see that redemption. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.